Good morning. Starting off with our disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing in this video is financial advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial product. All content is for informational purposes only, based on personal opinions and experiences. Trading futures, options, and other financial instruments involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for every investor. You can lose more than your initial investment, so always do your own research and consult with a licensed professional. Cut. Now, news. So we've got quite a few 8:30 things. Nothing super important. X autos month over month, wholesale inventories. Maybe we'll see reaction, maybe not. And then you've got jolts at 10 a.m. and S&P Case-Shiller home price year over year. That's not important for crude. So really, we'll see what happens 8:30 and then 10 a.m. I'd say just watch out. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Looks like we got a busier day tomorrow in terms of news and Friday. So yeah, we'll get into our pre-market sheet. So no one time framing at all. We broke one time framing higher yesterday on the weekly, so there's no one time framing on the weekly or the daily. We're obviously opening in an imbalanced condition because we're in a gap lower. Yeah, I've classed this as now an official swing high, so this new swing high is pretty weak. Not a huge excess, but it's better than the one at the low. I'll say that. So, whoops. Yeah, but that's transition. So now I guess if you think about it, we've got this week high down here and this week low down here, and one of them eventually is gonna have to break. Decent excesses on yesterday's profile. You opened up here. Not very cleanly, but you did do it. Bring value down here, so you did that successfully. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. We're in a gap lower, which is the main thing. As for key levels, we've got yesterday's low, which would be the gap close. We've got overnight VPOC just below it. We've got settle just above there. And then we've got yesterday's high way up here. And I guess yesterday's mid too, but that's pretty far away as well. And then below us, not much. We haven't been here for a while, so I marked down these naked settles and VPOCs. The orange is the naked settle. It's just hard. They're just overlapping. And then you've got this prior week low here and some singles here, as well as the decennial figure, the 60 on the dot. So this cluster could end up being important, but we'll see. Yeah, so that's the pre-market sheet. So let's go back to the TPO. Whoops, not like that. So, yeah, you can see from the TPO we did break out of this range. So, if you remember in plans yesterday, I was kind of open to either side because you opened up here close to the highs. And so that was a thing. And you were still one time framing higher on the weekly. But, the overnight price action was quite bearish, as well as, I can't remember it now, but there's something else. There's something else that could have led you to believe that we would have a bearish day. I just can't remember it. And so it was pretty ugly yesterday. It was choppy in the morning, and then we finally broke lower, and it just went pretty much straight down, and then finally sort of balanced out down here. So it wasn't super tradable, but yeah, it wasn't a surprise or anything. So you brought value down, and then I didn't say this, but you popped this low, and so in my end of day, I remember saying to myself, not in the videos, like if this continued lower, it'd be nice if we had a gap lower today. potentially for the continuation, potentially for the reversion. But we've had maybe a couple gap days, but pretty much my gap days are all the same. Like when it's a decent sized gap, this is still kind of small. But it's not the smallest. Was at 55 ticks right now. Um, but yeah, generally my general gap scenarios, I have the main two, which is obviously the gap and go, I call it, which opens in a gap and just continues, and the gap and revert, which is where you come up and you close the gap, potentially. Sometimes you touch settle, sometimes you don't. And then for the gap and revert, once you close the gap or you close, there's really three metrics. There's half gap, there's full gap, and then there's settle. Those are usually the three I'm looking at for a gap and revert for potentially a continuation in the gap's direction after you've closed it. Because sometimes closing it is all you need and then you continue. So, like, potentially after you close it, it's sort of just a pullback to continue in the direction of the gap. So, I mean, those are the main, like, broad scenarios. We also do have, this is more common in, I guess, smaller gap days where you don't end up doing much. You sort of chop around, you check lower, you check higher. You're staying in this area, you're sort of filling in, and then you usually end up, closing the gap in the chop and, getting something below, or that is also a possibility. But we will see how big this gap is once we open. You do have decent volume today, 83K, so if sellers keep the baton early, I could see this going, a good ways lower. That's if they, can keep control. We haven't even looked at the overnight price action yet, but it's pretty bearish. It's pretty bearish. I'll say that. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Like, these would be the extended targets. I'd maybe watch for this cluster of levels here for potentially at least a reaction, like maybe a bounce or a front run that then maybe still gets it. But other than that, anywhere, if we continue moving lower, I'm pretty much just zone to zone. And then if we continue higher, I'll watch the reaction at the gap close, the overnight VPOC, the prior day's VPOC, and then settle. And if we blow through all of those, then it looks like you may have a bigger reversion on your hands. And then we've got the singles up here. We've got yesterday's high. We've got, things we can fix up if we are to, end up moving higher today. So let's go to the 30-minute here. So this is the overnight session. So you can see we are pretty bearish. You sort of clustered here for a bit, then you finally broke lower, and you pretty much didn't look back. Good test of full session VWAP. I don't know, maybe it was closer to mid at the time, but that's pretty good. Respect for the full session VWAP there. So that's worth noting. Maybe if we do get a deeper pullback, it's respected again in the RTH. But yeah, you pretty much just continued lower again for, this is the area. Overnight VPOC is the area. Potentially, by the time we open, it could be down here. But either way, I'll be watching this 6140 area to see if we can break through it. Like, this will be an important area to get through to close the gap. If we can't and we sort of roll over, then you'd probably look better for the continuation lower. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think I really need to go in any more depth than that. Like, at some point, there's just not much else to say, right? And then it's like you trying to force things. So I don't want to force, saying things just, to have a longer video. So we'll get to drawing then. So our key things, we've got definitely overnight low. Definitely yesterday's low here. Potentially this area here. Then you've got settle, overnight high. You've got this cluster of stuff, like I said. Overnight low, naked VPOC, settle, dun, dun, dun. Potentially, like I said, yesterday's mid, and then yesterday's highs all the way up here, and singles. So, quite a bit of stuff, but most of it likely won't get touched today. Yesterday's high, singles, mid, settle plus overnight high, overnight VPOC, overnight HVN for now. Potentially, like I said, the VPOC could move down. Overnight low, singles, plus prior week's low. And the decennial figure, but I won't write that down. Yeah, so first scenario obviously would be, or I'll start with the gap and go scenario because that one's the easiest to draw. But really, it's like if you get a nice break away from overnight, like levels, overnight DGP / overnight value, like a good impulse break, retest of overnight low. That's sort of the cleanest way you could do a gap and go, pretty quickly, and then just continue from there. Going for, like I said, anything really below here, if I'm really just looking zone to zone. Like I said, this cluster potentially could yield a reaction. Maybe it's just a front run. I don't know exactly how important it's going to be, but it is a sort of cluster of levels, right? So, and then, yeah, potentially, I won't draw it, but potentially you could see like a failure. Like if you fail to get overnight low on a push lower, that also tells you something, right? That we likely are going to go for the gap. Like if you open down here, you can't get overnight low, and then you revert and you move higher. Like I said, so for the bullish scenario, there's a bit more to draw, but in terms of probability and like terms of happening today, I'd say all three scenarios are sort of equally weighted. Like obviously we have been more bearish the past couple days, but yeah, it could go either way. We could just gap and go. We could close the gap and then continue lower. We could trade sideways for the morning. We could, I think maybe the balance scenario is a little less weighted because we do have good volume today, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So with bullish scenario, like I said, if you can't get overnight low, that's a good sign for the bullish scenario. And then, like I said earlier, like this whole area here that's gonna be the thing to get through. Like you're gonna have to work for that, likely, to close full gap. And then from full gap, like I said, you could potentially turn around either at, full gap here or potentially even at settle. But in a bullish scenario, let's say we continue, you start grinding higher, you break back into prior week's range if you break above the gap. So if you're staying within prior week's range, then we likely get that test of settle. And then, like I said, from there, we could revert, we may not. And if we were to continue, then, like I said, there's poor structure all above us. And yesterday's high is quite far away. So I mean, definitely up here, if we do break above, we could turn shop. Like I said, and potentially in here as well. Frankly. And then, yeah, we've got settle, which will be a key resistance if we get there. And we've got this area gap close, which will be a key resistance if we get there. And those are the main ones, so that's pretty much it. So let me pause this and take a screenshot for myself. All right, here's the last look at the plans. So it's pretty simple. We've got quite a bit of key areas to watch for. So, I do prefer when there's more to look at because it's just like until you fully move out of this area, you're sort of, every test of something, which is always close by, is going to give you some information. So you're never just in, maybe there's nothing to do, but you're not just sitting there and like there's even nothing to go off of, when it's just like trending in one direction and there's just no pullbacks and nothing to get on. So we'll see how the day goes. See if I can get a couple trades in, and yeah, hopefully they work well, and I actually follow my plan. So I'll end it there, and I will be back at the end of day if I have any trades. So I'll see you then.